he died because of
He
your
was
liquor.
targeted because he's my son.
Okay, like
He was working on his EP. I bought Philadelphia for him so he didn't have to sign to a company because I knew what it was going to do. He interned at Rock Nation. And they approached him to sacrifice me.
Nobody had 50 Cent detonates Hollywood again on their bingo card, but here we are. One cryptic post, one sharp comment, and suddenly the entire industry started sweating like secrets were about to spill out of a cracked vault. This wasn't a casual troll. This felt calculated, deliberate, like someone finally decided the silence wasn't worth protecting anymore. Because when 50 Cent speaks, he doesn't whisper. He drops breadcrumbs, lets the internet connect dots, and watches powerful people panic in real time. And this time, the fallout didn't just graze random names. It brushed straight past Diddy and Beyoncé, two figures usually treated like untouchable royalty in the entertainment ecosystem. The internet froze. Screenshots flew. Comment sections turned into conspiracy think tanks. People weren't asking if something happened, they were asking how much hasn't been said yet. Because when Hollywood insiders start reacting without saying anything, that's when alarms go off. This wasn't just shade, this was pressure. And when pressure hits an industry built on image, alliances, and carefully maintained silence, cracks start forming fast. Tonight, we're breaking down how 50 Cent's latest move put Hollywood on edge, why Diddy and Beyoncé ended up in the crosshairs, and what this moment might expose about the power games nobody's supposed to talk about. The moment 50 Cent's words started circulating, Hollywood didn't erupt, it stiffened. That's always the tell. When something is harmless, people laugh it off. When it hits too close, they go quiet and start measuring sentences like every syllable has a lawyer attached. And this time, the silence was louder than any denial, because 50 Cent didn't come swinging wildly. He never does. He didn't name names in bold caps or unload a paragraph of accusations. He did what he does best, he implied, he hinted, and he let the internet do the heavy lifting. A breadcrumb trail, not a confession. Enough to spark panic, not enough to pin down. That's why it landed. Hollywood has an unspoken rule book. And one of the biggest rules is this: you don't pull the curtain back while the show is still running. You protect the machine, even when the machine protects itself first. 50 has never cared about that rule, and every time he ignores it, the industry flinches like it remembers why. The timing made it feel intentional. The entertainment world was already on edge, dealing with lawsuits, old stories resurfacing, and whispers about long-protected power structures finally cracking. The air was tense, like a house that smells like smoke before anyone sees flames. Then 50 Cent tossed in a spark, and suddenly, the names started circling. Diddy didn't get dragged in because of a single sentence. He got dragged in because history exists. Because when conversations turn toward influence, gatekeeping, and unchecked power, certain figures become unavoidable reference points. The internet didn't invent that connection, it recognized it. What made people uneasy wasn't what was said, it was how quickly everyone understood what was being suggested without it being spelled out. That's when Beyoncé's name entered the conversation, and the tone shifted completely, not because anyone accused her of anything specific, but because Beyoncé occupies a space Hollywood rarely questions. She's not just famous, she's insulated. Criticism usually slides off her like rain off glass, so the idea of her being anywhere near fallout triggered discomfort, not outrage. People didn't want to argue, they wanted reassurance, and reassurance didn't come. Instead, social media did what it always does when it smells a hidden story. It went into archive mode. Old interviews resurfaced. Industry relationships were mapped like conspiracy boards. Award show appearances, business TIs, mutual associations, everything suddenly felt relevant, even if no one could articulate why. That's the danger of implication. It invites interpretation, and interpretation has no brakes. 50 Cent stayed quiet while the chaos grew, which only amplified his presence. He understands something Hollywood pretends not to. Saying less creates more noise. Clarifications calm people down. Silence lets them spiral. Memes followed quickly, because humor is the internet's pressure valve. Some joke that 50 was running Hollywood like a group chat admin who finally snapped. Others compared the situation to the opening scene of a documentary nobody wants released but everyone would secretly watch. But beneath the jokes was tension, not laughter. The industry response was telling. There were no loud denials, no aggressive clapbacks, just careful wording, delayed posts, and strategic nothingness. Publicists didn't rush to extinguish the fire. They watched it first. That's never a sign of confidence, it's a sign of calculation. People started asking questions that Hollywood hates. Why do certain names always get whispered but never confronted? Why do stories circulate for years without daylight? Why does the industry protect some figures like assets instead of people? Those questions didn't come from 50 Cent directly, he just reminded people they existed. That's his real power. He doesn't expose secrets. He exposes the discomfort around them. Diddy's presence in the conversation grew heavier by the hour, not because of proof, but because of accumulation. Past rumors, past alliances, past silence, they stacked up. In the public imagination, like unread files suddenly reopened. 50 didn't have to say anything new. He let the weight of history do the talking. Beyoncé's situation was different. And that difference mattered. The conversation around her wasn't accusatory. It was uneasy. Fans weren't asking what did she do? They were asking why is her name even here? That question alone cracked the illusion of untouchability just enough to make people nervous. Hollywood relies on illusions. The illusion that power is clean, that success is separate from influence, that icons exist above the mess. Moments like this threaten those illusions, even if nothing concrete ever surfaces. And that's why this felt bigger than a celebrity spat. It felt like a stress test. Who gets defended immediately? Who gets silence? Who gets questioned? Who gets shielded by reputation alone? Those patterns reveal more than statements ever could. 50 Cent has watched this industry long enough to know where the pressure points are. He's been inside it, pushed out of it, and invited back on his own terms. That perspective makes him dangerous, not because he knows everything, but because he knows how things feel when they're about to break. The public reaction followed predictably. Some dismissed it as trolling, arguing that 50 thrives on chaos and attention. Others sensed something colder underneath, because trolling is loud. This was quiet, calculated, almost patient. Comment sections turned into debate arenas. Some people demanded evidence. Others argued that the demand for evidence is exactly how systems protect themselves, by requiring proof that can never surface publicly. The conversation wasn't about facts anymore. It was about trust. And Hollywood doesn't thrive when trust erodes. Every hour without clarification let speculation solidify, not into truth, but into belief. And belief drives perception far more powerfully than confirmation ever could. What made this moment especially volatile was that it didn't resolve. There was no punchline, no follow-up post explaining the intent, no clean narrative arc, just tension suspended in midair, like a held breath nobody wants to release. That's when people realized this wasn't the story. This was the opening. Because when someone like 50 Cent blows the lid off Hollywood, the damage isn't immediate exposure. It's the reminder that lids exist in the first place. Once the implications settled in, Hollywood didn't respond with clarity, it responded with choreography. Carefully timed posts, neutral captions, smiles that looked a little tighter than usual. The kind of behavior you see when people aren't sure whether to relax or brace. Because when a rumor has legs and nobody wants to kick it, the safest move is to stand still and hope it trips on its own. It didn't. The internet went full CSI, red carpet edition. Old interviews were pulled like archived files. Award show seating charts were scrutinized like blueprints. Business relationships were diagrammed in comment sections that suddenly felt like graduate seminars in who knows who. None of it proved anything, but proof wasn't the point anymore. Pattern recognition took the wheel, and it drives aggressively. Diddy's name kept surfacing, not as a headline accusation, but as a gravitational pull. Every conversation about power, access, and longevity seemed to orbit him, whether people intended it or not. That's the curse of being influential for decades. Your shadow is long, and when lights shift, it moves in ways you can't control. The jokes sharpened. Memes framed 50 as the chaos conductor, waving a baton while executives scrambled for cover. Others compared the moment to a season premiere where the trailer shows explosions but refuses to explain why. Funny. Yes, but the humor carried nerves. You could feel it in the timing, in the restraint, in how nobody wanted to say too much too fast. Bianchi's proximity to the conversation changed the temperature again. Not because anyone accused her of wrongdoing, but because the audience doesn't like uncertainty around icons. Icons are supposed to be fixed points. When they wobble even indirectly, the culture feels it. Fans didn't rage. They debated. And debate is more dangerous than outrage because it normalizes questioning. Publicists did the quiet work. Not denials. Not clarifications, recalibration. Language softened. Interviews pivoted. Topics were redirected. That's not damage control. That's weather watching. You don't shout at a storm. You adjust your route and hope it passes. 50 Cent, meanwhile, did what he always does when tension peaks. He said less. The absence of follow-up became the follow-up. Every hour without explanation was interpreted as confidence, or patience, or knowledge. Pick your poison. Silence led the audience project whatever ending felt most believable. Influencers piled in with the careful kind of commentary that benefits from ambiguity. The industry's changing. Old systems don't survive new light. Truth always comes out. Nobody named names. Everyone implied direction. It was vague enough to be safe, pointed enough to trend. And then came the split. One side demanded receipts. If you're going to blow the lid off, show what's underneath. The other side argued that demanding receipts is exactly how powerful systems survive, by keeping proof locked behind NDAs, fear, and time. The argument wasn't about facts anymore. It was about whether the public ever gets to see them. That's when the conversation expanded beyond celebrities and into structure. People started asking why Hollywood rewards silence. Why uncomfortable stories take decades to surface. Why accountability feels optional when success reaches a certain altitude. These weren't questions 50 asked, they were questions his implication unlocked. The reactions grew global. International fan bases weighed in. Cultural commentators reframed the moment as a turning point, or at least a stress test. Not of guilt or innocence, but of resilience. How does an industry respond when the audience suspects it's hiding something but can't prove it? The answer, historically, is delay. Delay until the cycle moves on. Delay until attention fragments. Delay until the next distraction arrives. Hollywood has mastered this rhythm. But the problem with delay is that it only works when nobody keeps tapping the glass. 50 kept tapping by not tapping at all. Every new meme, every think piece, every speculative thread amplified the original tension. And the more people talked, the harder it became to put the conversation back in the box labeled just trolling. Trolling has a punchline. This didn't. Diddy's camp stayed measured, not defensive, not loud. The kind of posture that says, we're aware. That posture calms shareholders but rarely satisfies audiences. Because audiences want closure, not composure. Bianchi's circle did what it always does in moments of ambient controversy. Elevate the art, spotlight the work, keep the aura intact. It's a smart move. Redirect attention to excellence and let ambiguity dissolve. But ambiguity doesn't dissolve when it's being fed by speculation. It concentrates. What made this escalation different from past flare-ups was the lack of a villain arc. No smoking gun, no viral clip, no headline moment to rally around. Just a pressure system building without a visible center. Those are the hardest storms to predict and the hardest to stop. The audience started noticing the patterns of response. Who spoke immediately? Who waited? Who never spoke? Silence became data. Timing became evidence. Even neutrality felt like a choice. In an environment this charged, doing nothing reads as doing something. Pop culture analogies multiplied. People compared the moment to an iceberg. What's visible isn't the danger. It's what's below. Others called it a power outage, nothing broken on the surface, but everyone stumbling in the dark. The metaphors kept coming because metaphors feel safer than claims, and still, nothing resolved. The longer it lingered, the more it felt like a prologue, a reminder that Hollywood runs on agreements as much as talent, and agreements don't like daylight. 50's implication didn't accuse, it destabilized. It reminded people that stability can be fragile when curiosity turns collective. By now, the conversation wasn't about whether anything specific would be revealed. It was about whether the audience would accept silence as an answer. And judging by the volume, acceptance wasn't trending. The industry tried to move on. New trailers dropped. New announcements landed. Award buzz hummed, but the undercurrent stayed. Comment sections kept circling back. Is this what 50 meant? Is this connected? Why does this feel unfinished? Because it was unfinished, and unfinished stories are magnets. They pull in theories, fears, hopes, and skepticism all at once. They don't explode. They expand. They don't end. They wait, which set the stage for the most uncomfortable phase of all aftermath without resolution. The kind where reputations don't collapse, but they do bend. Where alliances aren't broken, but they are tested. Where trust doesn't vanish, but it thins. After the speculation reached critical mass, Hollywood did what it always does when it can't control the conversation. It slowed everything down. Not publicly, internally. This is the stage where nothing looks different on the surface, but everything feels different behind closed doors. Meetings get quieter, language gets safer, invitations get selective. The machine keeps running, but the gears start grinding. That's when you know something landed. The biggest shift wasn't outrage. It was hesitation. People didn't cancel anyone. They were calculated. And recalculation is how power protects itself without admitting vulnerability. Nobody wants to be first to panic, but nobody wants to be last to adjust either. For Diddy, the moment didn't come with a headline collapse. It came with weight, the kind that sits on conversations and changes tone. His name didn't trend because of a new revelation. It trended because it refused to leave the room. Every discussion about influence, longevity, and unchecked authority seemed to circle back whether people intended it or not. That's the downside of being a fixture. When the lights shift, the shadows get longer. Nothing needed to be proven for the pressure to exist. Pressure doesn't need proof. It needs attention. And attention had already decided this was bigger than a joke. Silence from some corners didn't calm the moment, it thickened it. The absence of clarity made space for interpretation. And interpretation is where reputations quietly change shape. Bianchi's position in all of this was different, and that difference mattered. She wasn't accused. She wasn't confronted. She was questioned by proximity, and that's far more destabilizing in a culture built on iconography. Icons survive criticism. They struggle with uncertainty. When the audience feels permitted to ask why instead of how great, the spell weakens just enough to be noticed. Her brand didn't crack. It recalibrated. The response was elevation. More art, more excellence, more reminders of untouchable status. It's a classic move, and usually it works. But this time, it didn't erase the question. It hovered, quietly, like a tab left open in the background. The industry's real response played out in micro-movements. Fewer casual associations, more careful alignment. The kind of subtle distancing that doesn't make news but changes trajectories. Hollywood doesn't exile people loudly unless it has to. It waits, it watches, it lets time do the work. And time was doing plenty. What 50 Cent triggered wasn't exposure, it was permission. Permission for the audience to wonder out loud. Permission for commentators to connect dots without apologizing. Permission for people inside the industry to acknowledge, privately, that some questions never really go away, they just get postponed. 50 never followed up, and that might have been the most effective move of all. No escalation, no clarification, no denial of intent. He let the implication mature. In doing so, he shifted the power dynamic, because the moment he speaks again, the story changes. By staying quiet, he let Hollywood sit with the discomfort. That discomfort altered behavior. Panels avoided certain topics. Interviews pivoted away from industry politics. Questions got screened more aggressively. It wasn't censorship, it was caution. And caution signals fragility, not confidence. The audience noticed. Comment sections started framing unrelated news through the lens of, is this connected? That's when you know a moment has lodged itself into public consciousness. It doesn't need updates. It attaches itself to new information like Velcro. Every unrelated announcement becomes a potential footnote. The most telling sign of consequence wasn't backlash, it was delay. Projects moved slower, conversations took longer, decisions got pushed. When an industry feels watched, it hesitates. Hesitation costs money. Money hates uncertainty, and uncertainty was everywhere. For a system built on image control, that's dangerous. Hollywood thrives on clean narratives, heroes, villains, redemption arcs. This moment refused all of that. It offered no ending, no villain, no lesson neatly wrapped, just tension. And tension doesn't sell as well as closure, but it reshapes markets far more effectively. The culture shifted from asking, "What did he mean?" to "What if he meant more?" That's a subtle change, but it's seismic, because what if doesn't require answers to stay alive. It feeds itself. And then there's the long memory. Moments like this don't age out quickly. They get referenced sideways, brought up in unrelated debates, used as shorthand. Remember when 50 said, becomes a placeholder for everything people can't say directly. That's how influence works. When it's indirect, it becomes language. Diddy's legacy didn't collapse. It narrowed. Beyoncé's aura didn't dim. It tightened. The difference matters. Narrowing limits options. Tightening restricts movement. Neither is fatal, but both are felt. Hollywood learned again that the audience doesn't need proof to question power. It needs permission, and permission was granted. The second implication went unanswered. What made this aftermath especially unsettling was how normal everything looked. Awards still happened, releases still dropped, applause still rang out. But under the surface, trust thinned. When trust thins, institutions rely more on optics than confidence. Optics can be managed, confidence can't be faked forever. The story didn't end. It stabilized into background noise, the most dangerous kind. Background noise shapes behavior without demanding attention. It influences decisions quietly. It turns certainty into caution and loyalty into calculation. 50 Cent didn't blow the lid off Hollywood by revealing secrets. He did it by reminding everyone that lids exist and that they only work if people agree not to look underneath. Once that agreement weakens, everything above it feels temporary. This moment won't be remembered for what was said. It'll be remembered for what changed afterward. For the hesitation, the recalibration, the subtle shift in how power moves when it realizes it's being watched without applause. If you're still here, congratulations, you just watched Hollywood squirm without anyone ever naming names. No leaks, no receipts, just pressure. And sometimes pressure tells you more than proof ever could. Now it's your turn. Was 50 Cent just trolling the industry like he always does? Or did he crack open a door Hollywood has spent decades pretending doesn't exist? Do you think this was harmless chaos, or a warning shot that landed exactly where it was meant to? Drop your take in the comments, because the real conversations don't happen on red carpets, they happen right here. And don't tap the like button politely. Smash that like button like it owes you money, because every click tells the algorithm you want uncomfortable truths, not celebrity fairy tales. If you're tired of silence being sold as innocence and power being treated like it's untouchable, hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications too, because stories like this don't come with press releases. They surface in cryptic posts, quiet reactions, and moments where the industry suddenly starts moving differently. And when the next breadcrumb drops, you'll want to already be in the room. This channel doesn't chase gossip, we follow patterns. We don't scream accusations, we read the room. If it's whispered in boardrooms, debated in comment sections, and avoided on talk shows, truth